The presentation will be brief. We'll ring the gong, and then 22 minutes later, after we have spent that time together in silence, we'll ring the gong again. We'll open the floor for comments, reflections, sharing on what has emerged from our contemplation. And the whole idea of this is not to debate or to discuss or to um, enter into academic discourse. The idea is simply to reflect on what has come to us during that time together, because it's the time, and most importantly, the time together, that is so uh, signal in this experience. And I really do think it works. The quality of the conversation is so different after we've had that time of silence together. We close at 8:30 Eastern Time, uh, keeping the Zoom open a bit after that for informal conversation for those who wish. And we also don't prescribe a particular way to meditate. There's no cookie cutter approach, I always say. The important thing is that you find your way to silence, whether it's through breathing, or repeating a mantra, or a word that works for you. Whatever it is that sparks your contemplation and gives you the opportunity to take that time together to enter more deeply into your own consciousness. So, again, if you haven't muted your audio, please do that now. And I'll instruct you when we come to the discussion how to turn it back on again. And feel free to turn off your video during the meditation time if you wish, and simply enjoy the nothingness. Let me introduce the Reverend Cynthia Tootle, who's an expert on goddesses. She's also my neighbor. She's a minister at the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel, where both her intellectual and pastoral skills are very welcome. Cynthia is an engineer by training and vocation. She had a long career with the federal government, one of the early women, I might say, engineers working for the federal government. And now in her retirement, she has embraced her calling to ministry through the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel. She has an amazing scope when it comes to goddesses, studying one each month. I remember, Cynthia, the first time you presented, you said, I study one of these each month. I thought, my glory. She does. She studies one. She lives with her. She imbibes her. I think in some ways she embodies her. And then she shares her knowledge, and sometimes she even shares the goddess's own messages with us so very generously. And this is not your garden variety meditation. This is not the way I approach the world, but I love it. And I think what Cynthia does and what she brings is so important, because she brings us something so generously and so authentically and so uniquely that we can't help but have a very rich experience. Tonight she focuses on goddesses of justice. And I look forward to any messages you might have, Cynthia. So a warm welcome and an anticipatory thank you. And you can describe how your presentation will go. But thank you, thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone, and good morning, Coraline. Hi there. Last summer, on the summer solstice, I was planning and conducting a prayer service on the equinox, or the solstice. And that month I was studying a goddess who was a goddess of justice. So I decided that we would pray for justice on the solstice. So I was preparing for it, and I was looking for prayers and songs and so forth. And it really struck me then as I was preparing it, and during the prayer call when we were all praying our different prayers for justice, how many different ways there were to think about justice. And it really banged around in my head for months afterwards. So that's why I'm sharing with you the way your head can get caught up. One of the traditional ways, of course, of justice is eye for an eye, and you'd like to think we don't do that anymore, but then there's one that really struck me from my childhood, the Western movies, cowboy justice. The bad guys are coming in doing things. The man with a star on his chest gathered the guys. They all ride out and they hang or shoot all the bad guys. And then they came home and put their guns down, which really was sort of this romantic version of justice. I don't think it was when you think about it, what did these good guys doing, killing all these people really do to them? But a more common call for justice that we've all heard is like justice for George Floyd. And I struggled with that one because as they said it, it was like, they're running around out in the streets praying, shouting for justice. It's like, what did they want? And it seemed to boil down to somebody needed to be arrested, somebody needed to be tried, somebody needed to be guilty and go to jail. Is that truly justice in a metaphysical way? And what does that do for George Floyd? What does it do for his little daughter? It made me think a lot. And maybe some of you, if you heard of restorative justice, which is a wonderful possibility that justice should work to help restore, life or liberty or whatever to the victim's health. But, it doesn't seem like we're anywhere near that. So, so I kept struggling. I went to the goddesses, which is what I do when I'm struggling. The goddess that I had been studying that month was an Arabian goddess called Shams. And she was a goddess of sun. And their idea of justice was light being shown on it. That this whatever is out of the shadows and in the sun. It doesn't seem in what I studied that then action was taken. Maybe it wasn't needed. Maybe it just needed exposure. I think some of us may have seen the blind lady justice, blindfolded with her sword and her scale, which is sort of the common one they have in America for our buildings. They have pictures of her or statues of her. But if you go back to study these goddesses, this was really a model of a goddess called Themis, a very ancient goddess, but she was not blindfolded. She was an oracle. She could see the past, the present, and the future, which is a very different way of looking at scales and action than being blindfolded. And the other goddess that came up to mind for me was the Egyptian winged goddess, Ma'at, who, when you die, when anybody dies, their heart is taken out of their chest and put on a scale. And on the other side of the scale is one of her feathers. And if your heart is heavier than a feather, then you go to a bad place. If it's lighter than a feather, you go to a good place. It wasn't clear to me in studying her what lightened or heavied your heart. So it was like a final true measure of a person at one point. And I got to say that even the other thing that came up in our prayers from my congregation was the idea that people needed to be treated equally. Like a number of my congregation are teachers in DC schools, and they're very upset that their school children do not get as good an education and as some of the good quality experiences that children in other places do. So they were looking at things being equal. And I found, I think there's a part of my engineering mind that says there should be a right answer. And I wasn't finding it. So I kept looking. And what I think did the best for me as finding the answer is a song. And if Cheryl, you could play the song. It is called Justice by Ziggy Marley. So I'm afraid that some of those words might be hard to understand if just hearing it for the first time or this version. But that one line just has reverberated in my heart and soul, justice, the one word prayer. And I leave you to contemplate.
Good evening again, and good morning, Coralie. Thank you, Cynthia, for giving us a one-word prayer, putting justice first. I have put in the chat the lyrics in case you would like to consult them. I know it was a little bit difficult to discern some of them, but the one-word prayer. They're in the chat for your use later, and we'll certainly include them in the notes. Thanks to each of you for your participation in this communal silence